here, and I get the opportunity of going over with you our Fortune 500 company assignment. We'd like to thank Dr. Benson, Professor David Benson, for putting together this data sheet for us. But I'm going to go through the assignment with you here. And so this is where Professor Benson has gotten the information from the Fortune 500 back in, this data set comes from 2015, just so you know. So there's been some changes. So just don't go in and when we ask questions, look at some of the information right here for your quiz answers, but actually you'll find your quiz answers from doing all the data sheets. And we see here down here at the bottom, we're on their About tab. We have the Fortune 500 tab right here, and we're going to get some of our information on that. But this is the tab that we're going to fill out right here. This is the tab that we're going to work on. We're going to fill out all the information right here and fill out this tab and then answer some questions. So we've got 21 parts of the assignment. Don't freak out that it's got 21 parts, but I wanted to be very specific in what we wanted you to learn and to accomplish. So the first thing that we're going to ask you to do is right here under states, we want an abbreviation right here. So it says fill in column B under abbrev header, the 2-digit state abbreviation using the right function. So we've done this on a couple of other assignments, but we're going to use the right and the left functions today. And for those that don't know, there's also there's a left, right, and middle functions. So we're going to use the right function. The reason why we're not using a specific number or things like that is because the state names are all different size. So we're going to do equals right, and it's asking us what text. We're going to choose A5 right there, comma, and number of characters we want is 2, and go ahead and hit enter, and we have the state abbreviation right there. And we can go ahead and fill that down, copy it down. By now you should be very good at copying down a formula. So that's what we did right there, was copy that. The next thing we want to do is we're going to insert a column. Okay, here go to column D and click insert, because what we're going to do is, and then name this abbrev also, is we're going to show you another way to do what we just did in a different format. So it says right here, insert a new column in D and name it abbrev, and then copy. Number 3 is copy the data from the states in column A. So shift command or shift control down to highlight the entire column, command C or control C to copy, and then go over here in C5 and hit command or control V for paste and paste that in. Okay, and don't hit enter, just hit paste and then hit escape to get rid of our highlighted area over there that was highlighted uncopied. The next thing we want to do is we're going to use text to columns. So under our data tab, while we're in here, shift command down, highlight that. We want to highlight that. We're going to go up here to data, and we're going to use what's called text to column. We're going to take this information and take the text that's in one column and make multiple columns. We're going to make just 2 columns this time, and we're going to walk through a whole bunch of little things on that. And we're going to do this again later on in the Fortune 500 tab. But here, click on your data tab at the top, and to the right you have our sort, which you've done several times, filter, and text to columns. And when we bring up text to columns, it has 2 things. It's asking us for delimited, which is characters. We're going to separate by character or space or something like that, or a fixed width. We can't use fixed width in this case. You could in like a phone number, where you have a certain number of characters, you know, a phone number in the United States, 10 digits, or a social security number or something like that. You know, if you're using like the last 4 digits of your social security number, you could do that here. But in this case, we're using delimited, and it shows right here an example of what's going on. So we have Alabama-AL, So next, it's going to ask us what we want to do. We could use a tab, a semicolon, a space. In this case, we want to use an other. Okay. So make sure everything's clear. We want to use other. And other could mean anything. We could use a comma and all that, but we see that we have a space bar, a hyphen in here. So we would click other and then choose hyphen. And we can see that it split it out into Alabama and Alaska and Arkansas. We don't want to use the space button there. The reason why is some states, like North Carolina, if I chose the space button right there, we can see that it broke it out, New Hampshire, New Jersey, into different spaces. So we don't want to use the space. We're just going to use the hyphen. So to complete this, check other, and then type in your hyphen, which is next to your 0 to the right on your keyboard, and go ahead and click next. And then so it highlights it. We would just want general and finish. And there we are. We have full name and the abbreviation of Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona. Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas. It's actually very interesting on how they came up with the 2 letter abbreviation for each state. There's some really cool videos about how they did that. Now, what we have here, we can go ahead and format this a little bit. We see that our D is very wide here, our column D, and so we can go between column D and E and get my cursor to where I have my double arrows, double click on that, and you see that it just brought in column D into the smaller width for the width size on number of characters. So we've completed 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now number 5 says insert a new column into column E. So we're going to insert a new column and call this one abbrev also. By the time we're done, we're actually going to have 4 columns named abbrev, but this is what we want to do. So we're going to do that, insert a new column, name it abbrev, and now it says use the trim function in column E to get rid of the space. So what we have here is we actually have a space in front of this Alabama, and we could do this. There could be multiple spaces, okay, in there, or if we have states where we've made a mistake. So say there's New Hampshire right here as an example. I'll go out and put some spaces in there, and there's space here. We can use what's called the trim function, and I'll show you this down here, equals trim. And when you click on trim, what it does is it takes out all the extra spaces and leaves just one space between text. So I can come in here and choose C33 as an example where I did this with New Hampshire, and click enter, and now New Hampshire is without all the text. So I'm going to back all that up. Okay, and now what we want to do here is what we have in here is we had a space AL, and we want to get rid of all the spaces. I could have left that in there, and using the trim function it would have taken care of that. So I can do equals trim, okay, and you can hear my cats in the background, and my text over here is D5, and hit enter, and you can see that I've gotten rid of the space in front of the abbreviation. Now we're going to do this one more time. Right here it says using the trim function in column E, get rid of the extra space of column D. We did that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to insert a new column again into F, and we're going to also call that abbrev. And the reason why we're doing this is if we go to look up anything in columns D and E, in column D we see that we have an extra space. In column E we see that we have a function, not the text. So what we want to do is we want to, in column F, we want to make sure that we have text. So we're going to go ahead and copy column E using Shift Control down, and we're going to copy that function, and then we're going to paste it into column F So Command C for copy, Command or Control V for paste, and in that we are going to, right here you have your little clipboard that we see here, or we can go to the home screen and there's our clipboard right there, and we can click paste values. And now we can see, we can go ahead and click on this, hit escape to get rid of the copy function, and we can see that we just now have values now in column F. Do that again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete this column F here. And the reason why is, if we look over here in column E, what we have is, again, we have a formula, and what we want is the value, because if I point to this cell, I'm pointing to the formula in the cell and not the value. So an easy way to do that we're teaching you how to do this now, is just copy the column or the cell, paste it over here. So we'll come down here, Command or Control C to copy, Command or Control V to paste. We paste it in there, and then we have to hit our clipboard and choose paste values. Don't hit enter, because on my computer when I hit enter, what happens is it pastes over the formula, not the value. So once you hit paste values, you just come out here and click anywhere, and then we see that we have values pasted in there. So now we have 4 columns that say AVERAGEIF. On this very last column, what we're going to go ahead and do here is we are going to highlight that column and name the range. So again, you've done several assignments where you've named the range, so you can come over here into left of the function bar and name the range there, and we'll call this AVERAGEIF. So we just have the abbreviation, or you can go into formulas and name manager, then define name on a PC or define name on a Mac. Okay, so now we have done and completed 1 through 9. And again, here it says we should have 4 columns named AVERAGEIF. And now over here in the Fortune 500 tab, what we're going to do is we're going to copy the company's address. We'll paste it twice. We'll use the text to column and trim functions to separate addresses into street, city, state, and zip. And then we're going to name some corresponding ranges, and then come back to the States tab and fill out all of this information here. So click down here on the Fortune 500 tab down here at the bottom. Go over here to the Fortune 500. And what we're going to do first is copy this column E right here, which is the address. And we'll do Shift Command or Shift Control down. And instead of Command C or Control C as copy, we are going to cut. We can also right click and hit cut. And you see that this is Command X or Control X. So we're going to cut this. And it's highlighted over here. We're going to go to column K and click Command V or paste it. And we're going to go to column L and paste that again. Well, it's not letting me paste that again, but we'll copy that. Come here to E and delete that column. So we'll get rid of that column. Now between J and K right here, okay, we see that my information, so put my cursor between the two, double click and increase the width. Now Shift Command down, Command C, and come here and Command V and paste. So by the time we're done, what we should have done is we've taken the address and we've copied it twice, and this is what we want. Hit the escape button to get rid of the copy field. Now come up here to address, and what we're going to do here is address original. Okay, so we have the original address there. And now over here, what we're going to do is we're going to separate this address out. Okay, so highlight the column, not the header. Don't use the header. So start in K2 and highlight the column. Okay, and there's 500 rows of information here. So we'll use Shift Command down, and what we're going to do now is we are going to do text to columns like we did before. And over here, click Data, go to Text to Columns. Now what we're going to do here on Text to Columns is we're going to use the comma. So highlight the entire, go to the Data tab, Text to Columns. We're going to use delimited, which means characters such as commas or tabs. So this shows us right down here a preview of our selected data. We're going to click Next. And we're going to use the comma. So our delimiters is we have a comma. We don't want to use space or anything like that because it'll break it out incorrectly there. So we want to do just the comma, and we now have the street, city, state, and zip together. So we'll click Next there and just finish because it's just general. We'll keep it in general and click Finish, and we see that we have our street address, our city, state, and zip. And so we can call this street address. And this will be city. And we're not going to name that yet because we want to break this out. So there's a couple ways that we could do this over here. But what we want to do is we can do a trim function now. The reason why we may want to do a trim function now, or we could even do it later, is that we have a space between where the Boise was, comma, space, the state, and then zip. But we want to break out the state and zip, so there's two ways that we can do this. So we could use a trim function, trim it, and put it over here. So we'll do that. So let's put in here state and zip as our header. And I want you to do this so that we have that information. Right here, we're going to type in trimmed. So we're going to copy this. This will be trim, so equal trim. And what we're doing is we're getting rid of the space right there. Now there's two ways that we can do this. We could do a left function and bring in over the state. We can also now, if we wanted to, we can do a text to columns. So I don't mind which way you want to do it. So we could do this as a left function. So this would be the state right here, or again, you could do text to columns. We can do equals left. We did the right function earlier. We could do the left function this time. And that's the text. We can point to the text over here. And we want the left 2. That brings over the ID. And I'm actually going to rename this. Instead of state, I'm going to rename this left function so we know that it's left. And I want you to leave it in there so I can see your progress, and whether you use the left function or whether you use a text to column function there. And we see also that the same issue that we had on the previous tab with using abbreviations, we see that we are pointing to a function and not a actual value. So right here, this is what we're going to do. This will be our state ID. We're going to come and go ahead and highlight that column, copy it, Command C, paste it in here, Command V. You have to paste correctly so we can click that clipboard, and we want to paste the values, and now we can just click anywhere out of here, and we see that we have the value there. So what we did is we copied the original address, we moved it to the end of the sheet there, we pasted it in, So we cut and pasted, and then we copied and pasted again, and then broke out the street address, the city, the state and zip, and then we trimmed it, used the left function, then we copied the values, we copied the formulas and pasted it in and kept the values only. Now what we're going to do is let's slide back here to the left, and we're going to name some of these ranges. So on employees, this is the number of employees. Shift Command down, highlight it. I'm going to name this by going to formulas and define name, and it comes up here with my header, and that's okay. I want to name it employees. I can just click OK. I'm now going to come here to the revenue column. I'll go click define name. I don't want it in revenues underscore millions, but revenue is good. We'll name that one revenue. Do the same here in the profit column. Shift Command down, define name and profit, because it's already in there. It brought in my header, and so I'm good with calling that profit. And then all the way over here to the right under state, Shift Command down and make sure that I'm getting the state with the value in it, not the formula, because it won't work if it's the one with the formula. And I'll do define name, and I want this as state. And if you notice, I made a mistake because it's bringing up Idaho ID. May not have made a mistake there. Shift Command down, make sure I have got that whole thing. Then I'm going from P2 to P501, so it is the second, and I want to call this state. And now we've completed everything that we need to do in the Fortune 500s tab. And this is just preparing our data. Okay, so all we've done so far right now is just prepare our data so that we can now start querying our data and converting some of our data to information. We want to start getting some information from it. So go back here to the States tab, and here in States, we'll bring this up again. What we're looking at is we want to use the Countif function formula to count the total number of companies in each state. So this is my formula. So over here in column G under count is we're going to use our Countif formula, not ifs, because we're only looking at one thing. So Countif. My range in this case is state, which is on the other tab. So what's unique about this, by naming the ranges, I can bring in stuff from other tabs and even other sheets. So this is my state. So my Countif state, and then I'm just going to point over here to F5, do my comma, F5, my criteria I'm looking up is the abbreviation on the other sheet. So my range is the other sheet, but I'm counting it right here, and hit enter, and it shows that in Alabama there is one Fortune 500 company in that state, and then I can copy the formula down, and if you got it right, we have 1 in Alabama, 0 in Alaska, 4 in Arizona, like 53 in California. Okay, so there's our count. The next thing we're going to do, it says total employees. So when we have a total there, instead of a count, we're going to use a sum. Okay, and in this case, we're going to use SUMIF, not some ifs, because we're only looking at one thing. So SUMIF. Okay, and now our range is state again. That's our range, because we're looking at how many in each state. Our criteria that we're looking for is which state. And now the sum range that we want in this case is employees, because we want total employees. So we had already named that range before, so employees. So we're going to find out the total number of employees that Fortune 500 companies have in the state of Alabama. And I'll leave that formula up there just for a second so you can see. And then hit enter. And we see that in Alabama, they have 22,166 employees back in 2015. Copy that down. Now, because this is a number, I want it easier to read. So go over here to the home page, and in the center we have our formatting and we have our numerical formatting. I'm going to hit the comma. Now when you do that, it automatically puts into decimal points. We don't have a decimal point of an employee. So you can see right here I have an increased decimal or decreased decimal. I'll click that twice and decrease the decimals down to 0. But now it's easier to read because I have the comma in there. So 22,000, 166, and we can see down here. Now, what we just did for total employees, we want to do for total revenue and total profit over here to the right, because it says use SUMIFs to figure out the total number of employees, and then the total revenue and total profit, column H, L, and M. So we just did a SUMIFs. Over there, we're going to do the same thing, a SUMIFs again. Our sum range, again, is state, comma to move between what our functions are asking us. I'm going to point back here to the abbreviation. And if you don't come up with this, you need to make sure that your abbreviation you're pointing to, because we have 4 columns of abbreviation, is the abbreviation that has the values and not a formula in it, or a space. Okay, because if I point over here to D5, it's going to look up space AL, and we don't have space AL in our state name on our Fortune 500 tab. So that's why we did the trim, and then we had to take out the formula, because if I pointed to the other 2, I would get an error. So comma, okay, and I wanted SUMIF, not SUMIFs, so I'll get rid of that. My range is state, my criteria, then my sum range. So want to use SUMIF. The range is state, again my criteria pointing there, and I'm going to look up revenue. So we name that revenue over there and enter, and we see that the revenue is 5,967,000,000, because this is in millions. Alaska didn't have any because there's no Fortune 500 companies with headquarters in Alaska. Now this is done as a number, and that we want it as accounting. So while it's up there, go ahead and click accounting, and then same thing on accounting, get rid of the decimal points because this is in millions, so that's 5.967 billion, and so we want to format this in accounting style. Okay. The next is total profit. So what we just did with total revenues, we're going to do again in total profit. So equals SUMIF. Again, my range is state, because I'm looking up each state. My criteria is AL for Alabama, F5. And now our sum range is profit. We'll bring in profit and enter, and then copy that down. And we see that in Alabama in 2015, there was $1 billion of profit. We see that in Arizona, the total profit of all the Fortune 500 companies there was a negative $2.9 billion. Now, if we've gone out of there, go ahead and highlight that row. Highlight that column. And what I want is my accounting. I want it done in accounting, not necessarily currency. And then get rid of the decimal points, because we're rounding, because this is in billions. Okay. And we see that we have a few states with negative. So we just did 3 SUMIFs. That was number 14. Now number 15, 16, and 17, we're going to be using the average if formula. We have average employees. We have an average if formula. Then we have a MINIFS and a max. So minimum number of employees, maximum number of employees by any company. So average, we'll use the average function, average if, so equals average if. And we can start typing that in. We want average if. Again, our range in this case is also state, because we're looking up this by state. Criteria is Alabama. And then our average range is employees, because we're looking at what's the average number of employees in the state by any given company or companies, and we have 22,166 average employees in the state of Alabama. And the reason why it brings it up, because there's only one company in the state of Alabama, and so the average is also equal to the total. But if we look down here in Arizona, the total employees is 86,000. The average number of employees employed by any Fortune 5 is 21,657. And we want to go ahead and get rid of decimal points there. Okay. And we want to add a comma and then go back to get rid of decimal points. Now what it's going to have is this div, this number div negative, because it's coming in with no information. And instead of a 0, it comes in with that, but I'm going to show you how to change that later on. Just for aesthetics, we'll get rid of this div divided by the 0 with the exclamation. But let's go ahead and do the minimum number of employees. And so this formula is equal MINIFS. So before we use an average if, this is MINIFS. Again, the minimum range that we are looking for is state. We want to know, well, it actually goes backwards, because the minimum range, when we use the ifs, it flips on how we do that. So like average if, sum if, count if, we see that the range that we want is last, and the criteria and what those ranges are first. So on MINIFS, we want to know what the range is first, and the range on MINIFS is actually employees. It's what we'll use first instead of like last. Now it's asking for criteria range, and that is the state, comma, and we want to point to the abbreviation and enter. And we see that the minimum number of employees is the same as the average because it's only one company. But if we look down here, we can see that it changes. In Arizona, the minimum number is 5,932 employees. The total is 86. The average is 21,000, but the company that has the minimum is 5,930. So we're gathering some good information. Go ahead and do your comma so it makes it easier to read, and then get rid of your decimals. And now we're going to do MAXIFS. So equals MAXIFS. So we'll find out the company that has the maximum number of employees, or not the company, but in the state, what employer, how many employees are the maximum number of employees. The max range in this case is employees again. We'll do our comma. We're going to look up state is criteria, and then what is that criteria? We're looking up F5, and we see that the average, min, and max is all the same for Alabama because there's only one employer. And we can copy this down, do my comma, get rid of my decimals. So we see that as example in Arkansas, there's an employer that has 2,300,000 employees. That's not all in Arkansas. It's just saying that the company that has its headquarters in Arkansas has 2,300,000 employees. And if anybody knows about Arkansas, this is Walmart. Walmart is domiciled in Arkansas. Okay. So we now have filled out our form, and we have some pretty good information now that we can start making decisions off. For example, if you were promoting products to certain Fortune 500 companies, you need to know that, okay, California, New York, New Jersey, as an example, Ohio, these are states that you'd want to focus on. Now what we're going to do is says use the filter tab, step 18, to filter out states with 0 Fortune 500 companies, and then fill in the column G, yellow highlight. So what we're going to do is we will come over here to the data tab. This is also in the home tab on the far right. We have a sort and filter there, but on the data tab it's easier to see. We have a sort and filter, so click our filter button right there, and now we can start filtering and getting some information. Now under count in column G on this drop down, we'll click that drop down, and this allows us, we can sort this ascending, descending. We don't want to do that. We can filter by color, but we're going to unselect this select all and then click 0 and apply filter. And then we can X out of that and get rid of this, or just move it to the right. We'll X out of that. Okay. And we see here that these are all the companies, states that have 0 Fortune 500 companies in their state. And we also see that we have this pound division divided by 0, which means is you can't divide by 0. And so there's an error there. And if you don't want that to show up, we know that there's 0 employees there. We can just put a 0 in or just delete it. An easier way is put a 0. Now it won't let you copy and fill a 0 down in there, but I want a 0 in each of those, so I just 0 down arrow, 0 down arrow, because it's easy. It's only so many fields. But what it allows it to do when we go back, when we clear out of this filter and we go back, it's easier to read when we don't have that number division by 0 error. What we also want to do here is in count, go ahead and shift command down, highlight that. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill this in with a yellow. So we have this bright yellow. And this is part of the assignment in there. So we want you to do that. Fill that in with a bright yellow. And then we can actually hit clear filter. And how I did that is just go back up to the filter that you're in. Just click clear filter. It doesn't clear your information. What it does is it takes you back to the original screen. And now we can easily see the states that have 0 employees in their state from a Fortune 500 company. Okay. And by the way, you can go back in and do the filter, and now you can filter by color. Okay, so we can select a color, so cell color. And that's another way to go back in and filter things. The next thing it says we're going to do is using the conditional formatting function on the home screen to find the top 10 states and highlight them with red. So instead of coming here and doing a filter and all that, we're going to do a conditional formatting. It's on your home screen. So we're going to highlight the count column again, shift command down. We got to highlight that. Then on the home screen, if you're not on the home screen, go ahead and go to the home screen. To the right is conditional formatting. So we're going to go ahead and click on conditional formatting. And we have these different highlight cell rules. We got greater than, less than, top, bottom rules, data bars. We're going to use some of this later on in different assignments. But we want the top, bottom rules. And we're going to go ahead and click top 10 items. And we're going to keep this as the top 10. It says format only the top or bottom ranked values. We can do top, we can do bottom. We can change this from 10 to the top 1 or the top 5. But we actually want the top 10. And format with, and we're going to leave it on this light red. And click OK. And now we see that the yellow is none, the red, they're in the top 10. And if we actually wanted to filter that, we can click on our filter button over here. It says filter by color. I can look at the cell color and I can choose yellow or red. And again, it'll bring it up, it'll filter it for me. Now it says here to go ahead and get rid of, use the filter the rows with the division by 0 and delete the information for visual aesthetics. I already did that. So we can click clear the filter. And now it asks, and I won't show you how to do this down here, but at the very bottom, step number 21, use the filter and Countif Function formula. Find out the number of Fortune 500. So you can use the filter and filter it out. Okay. And you would do this actually on this screen right here. Okay, so if you wanted to add filters to this screen, you could do that. Okay, so we'll apply the filters. I actually have to click somewhere on here and then apply the filters. Okay, and so it's asking to find in the city how many are in Houston, Texas. So I can start doing that. That's one way I can do that. The other way that it can be done is it says to use the filter or the Countif function. So you can come here and do an equals Countif and count the number of, and this way it'll have to be city now. And we didn't do we did the filter with city. Let me make sure we did that in our formulas and our name managers. So we don't have a city filter in here, or sorry, a city name range. So if you want to use Countifs, you would come back here to the Fortune 500 company, go in here to city, shift command down, and name that range city. And now you can use a Countifs. But I'm going to let you determine the way you want to do that as a filter or a Countifs, and then insert that information right here onto number of Fortune 500 companies headquartered in Houston, Texas. Now let me give you a real quick. I have a lot of students who sometimes just put in Texas. We want the number of companies in Houston, Texas. Okay, now that you're done with this, go ahead and complete your quiz. Save this, add your name to the file, S4 with your name, save it, and then upload it. And very good job. You're done with this assignment. Thank you very much.